She never imagined her life would change so violently in a single moment. Everything felt normal that afternoon. The sun was still up, the streets were busy, and she was walking home the same way she always did. But sometimes destiny hides in the quiet, waiting for the one moment when you are alone and unprepared. She was walking with her school bag, humming a small tune, unaware that someone had been watching her for weeks. A man whose eyes carried darkness. A man who studied her routine, her path, her timing. A man who wanted control, not love. She was only a girl, barely starting to understand life, and yet fate was preparing to test her strength in ways she never asked for. When she heard the soft sound of footsteps behind her, she looked back casually, expecting nothing. But the world around her shifted the moment she saw the empty street. No people. No noise. Just silence. She took 2 steps forward, and a strong arm suddenly wrapped around her mouth. She screamed, but her voice disappeared inside a thick cloth pressed against her face. Her bag fell. Her feet kicked. Her fingernails scratched the air like a trapped bird. But the world did not hear her. The man pulled her into a narrow alley, his grip crushing, his breath heavy with cruelty. She fought wildly, her body trembling with panic, but she was too small and too terrified to match his strength. The last thing she saw before her vision blurred was a broken window reflecting her own frightened eyes. Then everything went dark. When she opened her eyes again, she was on a cold floor. Her head hurt. Her hands were tied. The room smelled like rust and damp walls. There was only one dim bulb hanging above her, flickering like it was afraid to. She tried to move, but ropes dug into her wrists. Her mind screamed for help, but her voice came out weak, shaky, trembling with fear. She asked where she was, why she was taken, what he wanted. But the man never answered with reasons, only with threats and anger. His face stayed calm but evil lived behind his eyes. He didn't want money. He didn't want revenge. He wanted power. Control. Silence. She felt like a bird whose wings had been broken before it even learned to fly. Hours passed like days. She cried until her tears dried. She prayed until her voice cracked. She begged until her heart felt empty. The room was her prison and he was the nightmare she couldn't escape. But she wasn't weak. Not inside. Even when her body trembled, her mind searched for ways to survive. She noticed small details, the loose wooden plank near the wall, the sharp nail sticking out of the floor, the distance between the man and the door whenever he walked. She memorized everything. She didn't know it yet, but her survival had already begun. One night, after the man left the room, she pulled her wrists hard against the rope. It hurt. The skin burned. She cried silently. But she didn't stop. Pain was better than fear. Pain meant she was alive. And after an hour of struggle, one knot loosened, just slightly, but enough to give her hope. When the door opened again, she quickly hid her hands behind her back, pretending to still be tied tight. The man stepped inside with the same cruel expression, but this time, she noticed something different. He was careless. Too relaxed. Too sure she was broken. He leaned close to check the ropes. That was his mistake. With the last piece of courage she had left, she kicked him hard and pushed herself toward the door. The man fell back, shocked, furious, but she didn't stop to see his face. She ran. Bare feet on cold concrete. Her heart pounding like a drum of survival. She didn't know where she was going, she just knew she had to get away. But the building was a maze of broken rooms and rusty doors. She reached a hallway, her breath sharp, her legs shaking. She ran toward a faint slice of moonlight coming from the outside. But just before she reached it, a hand grabbed her hair and pulled her back with a force that made her scream. She fell. Hard. Her knees scraped the ground. Before she could stand again, the man slammed the door shut and locked it. His rage was worse than before. He yelled, words full of poison, threats that froze her blood. She thought this was the end. She thought she had failed. She thought she would never leave that room alive. But something inside her refused to break. Even in the darkness, she whispered to herself. I will survive. I will escape. This is not where my life ends. And with that small flame of courage, chapter 1 of her long, painful journey began. She didn't know when or how, but she knew she would fight until her last breath. The room felt even colder after her failed escape. The walls seemed to close in, shrinking tighter each minute. Her heart was still racing from the fear, but her mind was strangely calm, as if it had finally accepted that fear alone wouldn't save her. She needed something stronger. Something deeper. Something that could survive even when her body felt weak. Hope. The man paced back and forth after locking the door, angry and breathing heavily. His footsteps echoed through the small room, each step sounding like a warning. She sat quietly in the corner, arms around her knees, pretending to be terrified. And she was terrified, but she was not defeated. Not anymore. When he finally left the room again, slamming the door behind him, she closed her eyes and took a long breath. She was hurt. Her wrists burned. Her legs were shaking. But her spirit whispered to her again. This is not where my story ends. She crawled toward the loose wooden plank she noticed earlier. This time she pulled harder. The wood cracked slightly, enough for her to reach her fingers through the gap. Behind it, she felt something metal, a pipe? Maybe she could use it. But the wood didn't break fully. Not yet. She stopped and listened. Footsteps outside. Voices. 2 men talking. For the first time, she realized he was not working alone. There were others. Maybe more dangerous. Maybe more unpredictable. She pressed her ear against the wall to hear better. One voice said, "Don't keep her here for long. Someone will look for her." The other replied, "Nobody looks for girls like her. They disappear quietly." Those words stabbed her heart. She felt her stomach twist with fear. But then, another feeling rose inside her. Not fear. Anger. A quiet burning anger that made her more determined than ever. She was not going to disappear. She was not going to be forgotten. She was not going to become a story people whisper about in sadness. She would survive. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Her body ached, but her eyes were sharp, scanning every corner of the room. She tried the rope again, pulling it against the sharp nail on the floor. The fibers started to loosen. Her breath quickened. She felt a tiny opening, hope growing in her hands. But suddenly the door opened. She quickly hid her hands again, pretending the rope was still tight. This time, the man didn't come inside. He only opened the door halfway and threw a piece of bread and a bottle of water onto the floor. The bottle rolled to her feet, shaking lightly. "There," he said coldly. "Eat." Then he shut the door. She stared at the food. Her stomach was empty, cramping with hunger, but she didn't touch it. Instead, she looked carefully. The bottle had a small metal cap, sharp enough to scratch. Sharp enough to cut. She quietly picked it up, hiding it in her sleeve. She could use this. Hours passed. The men talked. The building creaked with old pipes and wind. Every sound made her heart jump, but she didn't stop working. Inch by inch, she used the bottle cap to cut through the rope around her wrists. It took forever. Her fingers hurt. Her eyes burned. Her body screamed at her to stop. But she kept going. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last thread snapped. Her hands were free. For a moment, she couldn't move. Freedom felt unreal. She held her wrists and whispered, "Thank you, God, thank you." But she wasn't safe yet. She looked around the room again. The window was too high. The door was too strong. She needed another way. She examined the wooden plank again and pushed it with all her strength. It creaked louder this time. A small piece broke off. Behind it was a narrow space, too small to escape from, but big enough to hide something sharp or heavy. She reached inside, and her fingers touched a broken metal rod. A weapon. A tool. A chance. She held it tightly, her hands shaking. If she got the timing right, she might escape. But if she got it wrong, she didn't want to imagine what would happen. Night came. She could hear the men drinking somewhere in the other room. Their voices grew louder, then softer, then silent. Maybe they were asleep. She waited. And waited. And waited. Finally, she stood up quietly and took a step toward the door. Her breath was slow. Careful. Every sound felt like thunder in the silence. She pressed her ear against the door. Nothing. Slowly, she pushed the metal rod into the lock, hoping to turn it. Her hands trembled. Sweat dripped down her forehead. The metal scraped lightly inside the lock. She froze. No one came. She continued. After a long struggle, the lock clicked. The sound was the most beautiful thing she had heard since she was taken. She opened the door just enough to peek outside. The hallway was dark. Quiet. Empty. Her heart pounded like a drum. She stepped out, closed the door gently behind her, and walked toward the exit she had seen before, the one that looked like a shadow of moonlight. Every step felt like stepping into danger. But every step was also hope. When she reached the end of the hallway, she felt a cool breeze on her face. Fresh air. Real air. Freedom. She was about to step outside. When a voice whispered behind her. "Going somewhere?" Her heart stopped. Her whole body froze when she heard that voice behind her. Every muscle turned stiff, every breath stopped halfway in her chest. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. She recognized that voice, the slow, cold tone, the cruel control hidden inside every word. He was standing just a few steps behind her. For a moment, she couldn't move. She felt like a small candle trapped between two strong winds, freedom in front of her, danger behind her. "Turn around," he ordered. Her mind screamed at her to run, to escape before he could grab her again. But her legs refused to move. Fear held her still. Slowly, she turned her head, and there he was. The same man who had dragged her away from the world. The same man she had fought. The same man she wanted to never see again. But something was different this time. His eyes weren't angry. They were empty, like he didn't even see her as a human being. His expression didn't change as he took one slow step toward her. Another step. And another. Each step made her heart beat louder, echoing inside her ears. "You think you can run from me?" he whispered. She took a step back, not toward the hallway, but toward the outside air. One more step and she would reach the door. One more step and she might escape again. But he saw her movement and smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. "You're not leaving." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart was too loud, her thoughts too fast. She realized he wasn't as drunk as she hoped. He was alert. A hunter watching his prey. He stepped closer, and she gripped the metal rod hidden behind her back. He didn't see it. She held her breath, waiting for the right moment. She knew she wouldn't get many chances. If she hesitated, even for a second, everything would end. When he reached for her arm, she acted. She swung the metal rod as hard as she could, not to harm him, but to break his grip. The sound echoed through the hallway. He stumbled back, shocked, caught off guard by her sudden courage. She didn't wait for him to recover. She turned and ran. Bare feet slapping against the concrete floor. Her breath sharp like knives in her chest. The cold night air touched her skin like a promise. The world outside was just a few meters away. She could see the open doorway. She could smell rain. She could feel freedom. But behind her, she heard him shouting. Then she heard footsteps. He was chasing her. She pushed harder, her legs burning, her lungs screaming. She reached the door and pushed it open. A blast of cold wind hit her face. She ran into the night, her heart racing with fear and determination. The ground outside was rough, muddy. She slipped once, fell to her knees. Pain shot through her legs. But she got up again. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. She ran across the open ground toward the nearest road. She saw distant lights, maybe a house, maybe a shop, maybe someone who could help. The night sky above her felt huge, like it had been waiting to protect her all along. Suddenly, she heard a loud noise behind her. The man had stumbled, tripped, maybe fallen. She didn't turn to check. Every second mattered. Every breath kept her alive. She finally reached the road. It was empty at first, until she saw a pair of headlights approaching from far away. A car. A real car. A sign of the world she knew. Hope caught fire inside her chest again. She waved her arms wildly, shouting for help, her voice cracking with desperation. The car slowed. The driver opened the window, confused. His eyes widened when he saw her condition. Dirty, shaking, terrified. "Are you okay? What happened?" She tried to speak but only a broken whisper came out. "Help me, please." Before he could ask anything else, another voice shouted from the distance. It was the man. She flinched. The driver looked back and immediately understood something was wrong. He opened the car door quickly. "Get in. Now." She climbed inside, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The driver locked the doors and sped away before the man could reach them. For the first time in days, she felt safe, safer than she ever imagined. She looked through the back window and watched the building grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. She didn't know where the driver was taking her. She didn't care. She just wanted distance. She wanted air. She wanted life. The driver spoke softly. "You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you." She covered her face with her hands and cried, heavy, shaking sobs that washed days of fear out of her chest. She cried for the girl she was, and the girl she would become after surviving something so cruel. Night passed slowly. The driver took her to a police station, where officers spoke kindly to her and wrapped a warm blanket around her shoulders. They asked gentle questions. She answered as much as she could, her voice weak but steady. But even after reaching safety, she felt fear lingering inside her. A fear that didn't leave just because she escaped the building. Her body was free. but her mind was still trapped. She didn't know that a long journey of healing was waiting ahead. A journey that would test her strength more than the night she escaped. But she was alive. And that was the beginning of everything. The days after the shocking discoveries felt long and heavy. Everyone involved, family members, neighbors, and even people who had only heard the story, waited for answers. Rumors were spreading everywhere, and every new piece of information made the case more confusing. But underneath the confusion, something important was happening. The truth was slowly rising to the surface. For weeks, the family lived in fear. They kept thinking about what happened, replaying every conversation, every moment, every small detail that might reveal the truth. Some nights, they couldn't sleep. Other nights, they woke up suddenly, thinking they heard footsteps or whispers outside the house. Trauma had made their minds restless. But despite the fear, one thing had become clear: the story people were telling in public was not the real story. Someone was lying. Someone was hiding something big. Someone had carefully built a plan that fooled everyone for a long time. Slowly, evidence began to surface, evidence that did not match the lies that had been told earlier. The police, who previously treated the case as something simple, now realized they had been misled. They reopened the investigation with fresh eyes, new officers, and more advanced tools. This time, nothing would be ignored.